Two new studies and alarming headlines at the supervolcano Campi Flegrei in Naples in Italy. That is not good. One study says there is an acceleration with deep magmatic input, and the supervolcano is moving towards a critical mechanical threshold. The unrest at Campi Flegrei, they say, is not simply growing at a normal exponential rate. They say it follows a faster, nonlinear acceleration pattern called a finite time singularity. Which means, in simpler words, the system is moving towards a critical transition until 2030. Wait a minute, we have 2026. That is soon. Accelerating unrest at Campi Flegrei signals a critical transition. This is one of the headlines that we're just seeing coming out of new scientific papers. I'm reading you another one. A transition may be coming for a massive Italian supervolcano. Campi Flegrei, a volcanic caldera near Naples in Italy, is speeding towards a transition, a new study suggests. So many headlines now in the news. This thing is going to blow. It's going to erupt way sooner than everyone expects. And this is a super volcano with many people living on top of it. That's why we need to clarify what's going on at the moment, because especially in light of the America's Cup that is happening in Naples in September, which according to their own evacuation plans adds to congestion and so many more people. So is everything that we thought wrong? We have a new study about where the magma is that shows us something very interesting as well. And guys, I just said it yesterday, a few days ago, the earthquakes that are happening. This came out of surprise. 4.4 in the water, shaking basically the whole coast there of Naples. And since then, we have more earthquakes. The 4.4 shortly followed by a 1.2, 2.1, and then 1.9 on the 23rd, a 1.7 on the 23rd, on the 24th, a 1.3, and right now a 1.6 at Vesuvius. We have talked about Vesuvius also quite a bit because Naples, greater Naples area, more than 6 million people is squeezed in between Vesuvius and Campi Flegrei. So are they sharing something? What science is this, guys? Let's dive into this. This is important information. The headlines about Campi Flegrei are getting darker right now, and they're saying basically the supervolcano, the supervolcanic system of Campi Flegrei, the Phlegrean fields in Italy, could reach a tipping point within the next 10 years. And important is within, not in 10 years, right? Within always means tomorrow could be a possibility. Of course, in 10 years could also be a possibility. And another study says Campi Flegrei is accelerating towards a critical transition. What is it transitioning into is the question that you have probably right now. And then another says an eruption could be on the way. And again, this is not just any volcano. This is this giant restless caldera that looks like meteorites or bombs were hitting the area west of Naples in Italy, towns sitting inside the volcanic system, and hundreds of thousands of people living in the immediate red zone, the immediate danger zone. So when the headlines like this appear, people pay attention. We all are paying attention. But then something very important happened, and that's also interesting because we have the scientific studies and papers on the one side that have produced these headlines. But then today something comes out of the INGV, that's Italy's official volcano monitoring institute. And there has been some tension between scientists and the INGV. The INGV's own scientists said, well, guys, I think we should at least evacuate the red zone. There's more danger than you're saying, actually. And that raises doubts. Okay, are they telling us everything? Or do they just want to keep everyone calm because of real estate development, real estate values, businesses that are coming to the area? Because now they have pushed back against these releases and these studies, which is very, very interesting. They said, well, one study is just preliminary. It's still under scientific review. Well, it has been published, right? So they said it's also not a deterministic prediction. Yeah, they always say, we're monitoring the system, and their own scientists say, well, monitoring doesn't guarantee you safety. So what's behind that? We have to unfilter this. We have to find what's really going on, I would say, right? Because they stressed the studies do not mean an imminent earthquake or eruption is being forecast. Yeah, until it's happening, right? You can't forecast that, but you can look at the scientific studies and the scientific data. And that's what these studies are actually doing. And then you have to interpret them. So the obvious question is this. Are these headlines exaggerating the danger? That is the real question. Or are the officials trying to prevent panic in one of the most complicated evacuation zones on Earth? In Europe, definitely. So that question is uncomfortable, guys, I know. But this is exactly where the real story begins that we have to look at too. Because the answer is not simply Campi Flegrei is about to erupt, right? And it is also not nothing is happening. That's the fine line that divides it. So the truth is definitely more tense than that. And yes, some of the headlines may be too direct. The INGV may be right to correct them, I would say, to some degree, because the volcano is still rising, the earthquakes are still happening, and the hydrothermal system is still under pressure. Everything is increasing. We see that in the INGV's own monthly bulletins. So, of course, that new study that has been released raises the serious question in our heads, is Campi Flegrei moving towards a new threshold, even if no one can say exactly what happens when it gets there? So this is where we have to separate three things, guys. The first thing is the media panic. The second thing is the official caution. And when I'm talking about media panic, I'm talking about newspapers, local releases. I'm not talking about these AI slop channels that are popping up everywhere, AI voice, and that are telling it's blowing, it's this one, and they're showing. Don't listen to this. Again, I have to say, because this is an epidemic. AI voices now really sound like real people. But if a person never shows their face, them being alive, not a photo. Even that, I mean, they're impersonating me right now, and it looks pretty real. Ask these channels to make alive, where you hear that voice and actually see them. None of them will be able to do that. So be careful. So official caution is the second thing. And the third thing is the volcano itself. Media headlines want a clean story, eruption coming, disaster warning, countdown to catastrophe. We know that. Officials, they want the exact opposite. Calm language that leaves doors open, right? No panic, no definitive claims that cannot be proven. But volcanoes do not care about headlines or press releases. We've seen this with many volcanoes in the past. So they follow pressure, heat, gas emissions, magma, fractures, and the strength of the crust above them. And the last one, we know the crust above Campi Flegrei is heavily damaged and weakened like never before. And especially at Campi Flegrei overall, all those things matter right now. The INGV, I want to make that clear too, is also not saying Campi Flegrei is safe, right? So they're saying this one study should not be treated as a prediction of an imminent eruption. And here's the wording imminent, right? So this is a very different statement. And that matters because if people hear like the tipping point between 10 years, they may think scientists may have predicted that exact date of an eruption. They have not. But if we hear the INGV pushed back, they may think the danger is fake, and it's not. It's not fake either. That's the thing. That is the tension, and the warning may be uncertain, but the unrest is absolutely real. I'm not saying the INGV is lying, but I'm saying their job is not only science. It's also public risk communication. And in a place like Naples, one badly misunderstood headline can create fear before the science is ready. So what does the study actually say? That's the interesting part. Not what the headlines are saying. We will look into that. This study says the system may now be speeding towards a critical transition. Speeding and critical transition are the key words here. And the dangerous part is this. The scientists do not yet know whether that transition means an eruption, a peak in the current unrest, or a deeper change inside the supervolcano, because this is happening under one of the most densely populated volcanic danger zones. It's not a normal cone-shaped volcano like Mount Vesuvius. It's a giant volcanic caldera, basically a collapsed volcanic system, roughly 10 miles, 15 kilometers across. And parts of the city of Pozzuoli are inside. More than 500,000 people live in the wider red danger zone. And now two different scientific stories are coming together at the same time. One study is looking at the deep magma system underneath Campi Flegrei. The other is looking at the speed of the unrest itself. And together they make the situation way harder to ignore, because the question is no longer, is the ground rising? The question is now, why is it rising? What's feeding it? And how much longer can the crust keep taking this pressure? Campi Flegrei has been under unrest since 2005. That means for more than 21 years, the ground has been lifting up, the earthquakes have been shaking the area, gases have been rising, and the hydrothermal system underneath the Solfatara and Peschiarelli has been heating up and pressurizing. That's often called bradyseism, right? The word sounds slow and almost harmless, but what is happening now does not look like a simple, slow breathing of the ground. Not at all. The deeper picture suggests a volcanic system is being fed from below. And this new study has looked beneath Campi Flegrei. They have used seismic waves from more than 500 distant earthquakes. That sounds technical, but the idea is simple. When earthquake waves pass through the earth, they change the speed when they hit different materials. So solid rock behaves one way, but magma, partially molten, weakened rock behaves differently, like a gluey mass, right? Waves can't travel that fast. And what researchers now found under Campi Flegrei is not just one simple magma chamber. They found a multi-level system. It's deep below the caldera. Now we talk about the deeper system. We know there's a lot of magma batches higher up, and we've seen studies about that. But now the deeper system, it's between 16 and 33 kilometers down, roughly 10 to 20.5 miles. They have identified a zone where seismic waves slow down. And that is important because low seismic velocity can point to hot rock fluids or magma. So they say that in parts of this deep zone, the melt fraction could locally reach about 30%. So that does not mean there is a giant empty cave full of liquid magma. That is not how these systems usually work, but it does mean the volcano may have a deep, hot, partially molten source zone that can feed gases, heat, and possibly magma upwards over time. And above that deeper zone, the researchers also found hints of a possible transport area, and that doesn't sound good. Between about 10 to 16 kilometers deep, around 6 to 10 miles, plus a possible accumulation zone around 8 kilometers or about 5 miles below the surface. And that accumulation zone has been confirmed with other studies in the last 2 years. They say it's even more shallow, like roughly 4 kilometers, right? So roughly 2 to 3 miles. So this is not just a shallow steam problem that is happening here. The new picture is way more disturbing. Campi Flegrei may be a connected system deep magmatic input below, fluids moving upwards, pressure building in the hydrothermal system, and the brittle crust above being bent, cracked, and shaking. Because often we think, oh, that's just hot water and steam coming out of these fumaroles, right? The shallow damage may be happening in the hydrothermal system, but the energy source appears to be deeper and magmatic. That's the first major point, but now comes the second one, guys. A new separate study looked at the acceleration of the unrest, and this is where it really becomes dangerous, more dangerous and interesting. The authors studied the earthquake activity and the ground deformation and asked, is Campi Flegrei simply becoming more active in a normal gradual way, or is the acceleration itself accelerating? So that sounds like a small difference, but it is huge. Imagine a car going faster. That is one problem. But now imagine the car is not only going faster, the rate at which it speeds up is also increasing, and that's a different kind of problem. So this study suggests that Campi Flegrei's unrest is better described by what scientists call a finite time singularity. So that means the system may not be moving in a straight line. It may be moving towards a threshold, a breaking point. So not necessarily an eruption tomorrow, not a guaranteed catastrophe, but a point where the current pattern cannot continue in the same way forever. Okay, it cannot continue in the same way forever. So the study's independent analysis point towards a possible critical time window around 2030 to 2034. That's not a date for an eruption, guys. It's also not a doomsday clock, but it is a warning that if the current trend continues, the system may be forced into a different state within the next decade. And that different state could, of course, be several things. It could be an eruption. It could be a peak in that whole Brady seism where the system releases pressure without erupting. It could be a change in the internal plumbing of the volcano where gas, fluids, or magma move into a new pathway. But the key point is this: the new study says the outcome remains uncertain. And uncertainty is exactly what makes Campi Flegrei so dangerous, because this volcano does not need to produce like a giant super eruption to create an absolute disaster. A much smaller eruption inside a populated caldera could still be absolutely devastating. The last eruption was Monte Nuovo in 1538, and that eruption has built a new cone in just a few days. It was not the biggest eruption of Campi Flegrei and not the biggest one that Campi Flegrei is capable of. But in today's world, with modern towns, roads, homes, schools, hospitals, and hundreds of thousands of people in the danger zone, we have to make it clear, even a smaller eruption or explosive eruption, phreatic eruption, would be a major emergency. And that's why scientists watch the crust. The crust above Campi Flegrei has been stretched again and again. We had these unrest episodes in the 1950s, 1970s, 1980s, and now the current one since 2005. Each episode matters because rock remembers stress, and it can be damaged, weakened, cracked, and pushed closer to failure. And that's what's happening here, right? So, of course, not every earthquake swarm is like, oh, the final warning. But it does mean the system today is not starting from zero stress, right? It's building on decades of deformation. And since 2005, the ground has been risen dramatically. The latest reporting says the caldera floor has risen roughly 1.6 meters. That's 5 feet, something like that, during the current unrest phase. And we also show continued uplift. And the geochemistry that is happening at the caldera right now is important. We have a long-term heating and pressurization trend of the hydrothermal system. At the Solfatara area, the BG Fumarole has an average temperature of 170 degrees Celsius. That is about 343 degrees Fahrenheit. This is like an oven. You can bake something in it, right? At Pischiarelli, carbon dioxide flux remained within the longer term increasing trend. And every bulletin we get from the INGV confirms hydrothermal system still showing signs of heating and pressurization. To me, the honest headline is not an eruption is happening tomorrow. The honest headline is Campi Flegrei may be moving towards a dangerous threshold, and scientists cannot yet say what happens when it gets there. So the study analyzes the current unrest at Campi Flegrei, and they started looking since 2005, focusing on the ground uplift, the seismicity, and these geochemical signals. The authors argue that the unrest is not simply growing at a normal exponential rate, but it follows a faster, non-linear acceleration pattern called a finite time singularity. In practical terms, they're saying that the system may be moving towards a critical transition within the next decade. They estimate that the ground uplift could reach about 4 meters, that's 13 feet, by the early 2030s if the current trend continues. And they say that acceleration is connected to this deep magmatic volatile input. That means gases and fluids from deeper magma may be progressively pressurizing and weakening the crust. So they describe the system as moving towards a critical mechanical threshold, but they state that there's no evidence of an imminent eruption. They always have to say that, right? And the outcome remains uncertain, but they're giving us a definitive warning. What is your thought on that? Let me know in the comments. We know they all have to be careful in their wording. What do you think? What's the danger level at Campi Flegrei? I would like to hear your opinion. Thanks guys for watching. Stay safe. If you want to support the channel, link is in the description. Thank you for being here, and check out this video here in the end screen because it is crazy what is going on there. And they missed the signal of the volcano in Portugal. And actually something strange was happening there because the earthquakes, there were massive earthquakes after Shizzy hit the fizzy. And this is active right now, and this is dangerous. So really, really watch it. I don't want to spoil anything. Bye.